whom we've worked very closely in the recent past, and to whom we owe a great debt for bringing the engineering profession together at the beginning of this year, which eventually led to the task team that we had. And to the members of your institute who volunteered their time and still volunteer their time to help us to deal with a national crisis, which hopefully with the ingenuity and hard work and the passion that we've seen from your profession, we can say we're beginning to get to terms with, although I don't want to claim that we've overcome all of our difficulties at this point in time. The response of your profession is also one in line with the call of the President to Mamina. Come forward, offer your skills, assistance, and passion and energy to the country so that we can deal with the challenges on the one hand, but also seize the opportunities that we have in South Africa and make South Africa a great country. Now, when addressing issues like the challenges and opportunities of the electricity and energy space, as you call it, I have to confess I'm just a very badly trained pharmacist. We did a bit of physics and a bit of chemistry. I pretended just now on the radio in an interview of about 10 minutes to be, somebody called me a practical engineer or an amateur engineer, trying to represent you and saying all is reasonably well and in good hands, but hopefully what I said is in accordance with the truth as well. So I start program director on the basis that the engineering profession is not an island. It doesn't operate in isolation of other professions. It doesn't operate in isolation from societal context in which we find ourselves. It doesn't operate in an institutional isolation as well. So the context in which we operate our country, our globe, at this point in time, and the kind of trends that are unfolding both globally and in our own country are not immaterial to your profession, as the previous speakers have already pointed out. Engineers should be, like any other profession, and indeed any other person in our own country, concerned with the issues that we have inherited from our past but have as our challenges at the present, which is how do we produce inclusive growth? So how does your profession contribute towards a more equitable distribution of the benefits of what we call GDP? Throughout the globe today, the big concern, which I'm sure some of you are aware of, is not the fact that you have a 2%, 1%, or 10% growth in one's economy. The big concern today with the slowing global economy is how are the benefits of that growth actually distributed amongst the citizens. And in a sense, engineers and professionals constitute part of the elite in society, both in South Africa and elsewhere in the world as well. And that elite has attracted a fair amount of distrust among citizens because elites tend to serve themselves. Elites tend to accumulate benefits for themselves. Elites tend to ensure that institutions on occasion are maneuvered in a direction where a few benefit from the patronage that those institutions have to actually offer. So one of the principal challenges in the globe is how does not just the engineering profession, but all of us generally begin to conceptualize a world and envision a world where there is fairness, where there is equity, where human rights are enjoyed by all the citizens of the globe, all 7 or 8 billion of them. And in your particular case, we've met that challenge in South Africa in the form of electrification of households. Prior to 1994, we had 50% or more households that were electrified. Today, somewhere between 75 and 85% of the households have become dependent on electricity. Whether it's the young people wanting to study, whether it's the male or the female cooking, invariably it's the female at the moment in this chauvinistic society that we still have. And I don't see enough women in this room, generally. The basics of life is dependent on whether electricity is available or not. And that's why load shedding becomes a big issue. It becomes a big issue because its lack of availability disrupts life at a very fundamental level, let alone what it does to a smelting business, a manufacturing business, a coal mine, and other important entities in our economy as well. So inclusivity is, if you like, the big challenge of the 21st century as we go forward. The second is social justice. And that's in some ways linked with the concept of the just transition as well. How do we ensure that both as a profession, but more importantly as a society, as our previous speaker pointed out, we have leaders who are not just interested in themselves, who are not driven by individual greed, who are not there to extract patronage for their particular circles of friends and associates, but who are there to ensure that social justice is spread across society, meaning people have proper access to the right levels of education from the age of 1 or 2. We often think it only starts at 6 or 7. That we have the right quality of healthcare provided for all citizens in the country, indeed all citizens of the globe. Thirdly, that there's a social security net which is there to protect the most disadvantaged and those who are economically unable to look after themselves. And there's a broader concept of just lack of discrimination, lack of racism, lack of sexism, and all the other negative isms that contaminate human society from time to time. And the just transition is an important component as we move forward towards the broader concept of social justice and inclusivity as well. And if the engineering profession is to begin to talk about the challenges and opportunities in the 21st century, I mean, that's the kind of broader context I would suggest, and we can debate that when I finish, that we need to locate ourselves in. Because a narrow conception of our task, a narrow conception of the role of the profession can end up with ourselves being in a state of mind which says, where's my next tender coming from? Where's my next business opportunity coming from? How do I grow my business versus somebody else's business? How do I ensure that I make the right, if you like, to use a South Africanism, the right connection so that I can outmatch somebody else in terms of access to business? And I think some of the nodding heads in the audience suggest that I'm communicating the right message at this point in time. So the broader view in the context of the kind of leadership that Mr. Setswane talked about a few minutes ago is, I think, a crucial requirement of leaders in the engineering profession, as it is for leaders in other professions and other segments of society as well. Having looked at those broad trends, if you like, we need to also maybe concern ourselves with where the globe is at the moment in terms of the mega trends that are operating at this point in time across the world. So there are those who have analyzed the more recent trends in both politics and society and culture, and are saying that we are entering a period where there's a significant competition between advocates of ultra-nationalism on the one hand and democracy on the other hand. So there are those who believe that or nationalism in the narrow sense of the word is the way to go. And it's beginning to infect some of our thinking in the South African context as well, where only we matter, only South Africans must be employed in a particular environment. Once you talk about South Africans operating overseas, that's not important. But if you talk about a foreigner coming here to offer some technical assistance, as we saw in the recent past, there's a big hoo-ha. Why are we bringing foreigners here? But then should other countries that rely on South African expertise in Philippines, in Malaysia, in Indonesia, in Saudi Arabia, in the Middle East, chase South Africans away from there as well? Because we are foreigners in that particular environment as well. But the more important point in this regard is that ultranationalism undermines democracy. Ultranationalism begins to advantage just a few within a particular society, and both the economy becomes undemocratic because it's narrower in terms of those who have access to the benefits of an economy, but it also undermines institutions of democracy as well, as we've seen in the recent past in our own context. But secondly, ultranationalism leads to a vicious form of right-wing populism. And you see that happening in many parts of Europe today, leading to phenomena like Brexit, as we see in the context of the UK, and resulting in protectionism of one sort or another as far as trade goes. I know some of you must be thinking, now what the hell has this got to do with engineers? But that's the broader context in which engineers are operating. And leadership and the kind of active role that engineers are required to play is quite dependent on our interpretation of these trends and how they actually impact upon us, both as South Africans, but more generally as well. Equally, on the economic front, what we are finding is that across the globe and in many countries, there's high levels of concentration in economies. And as engineers, you would know that this takes a particular form as far as what is called big tech is concerned. So today, I'm not sure how many of you are on Facebook and those sorts of digital mechanisms, but all of your data is not available to you, it's available to Facebook. It's available for sale to Cambridge Analytica and others. It's available to analyze what you like and what you don't like and what your preferences are. It's also available for political manipulation, as we saw in the 2016 American elections as well. And we are heading towards elections in the South African context as well. So these forms of concentration, the dominance of multinational companies and multinational tech companies is also an area of concern because it begins to impact on the sovereignty of different countries and the kind of economic and political trajectories that they can actually follow in their own right. It's in this context that I think we need to look at the whole question of other forms of technological challenges, like the fourth industrial revolution, the role of artificial intelligence, both in your industry and more generally as well. But we often romanticize this, and the flip side of that coin is what is the social and economic impact of these new technologies. So yes, there will be potentially a productivity increase, although countries like the UK in the recent past, despite a few years of digitization and so on, have shown no remarkable growth in their economic productivity up to this point in time. But the big concern across the globe is how do you train, let me see, the average age here is about 40 in this room, or thereabouts. So even 40-year-olds, how do you retrain them to fit in with the new digitized economy? They're a little bit more agile than 60-year-olds, I suppose, but nonetheless, 60 years of age is still a working age in most parts of the world. And the kind of adaptation that is going to be required and retraining that's going to be required is quite acute. It's also this phenomenon of powerlessness, this phenomenon of being marginalized, this phenomenon of distrust between elites and citizens, and this lack of direction and sense of where is the world going and where is my future and where is my children's future going to be, that then creates a toxic political mixture which can be capitalized upon by all forms of populism as well. So the future of jobs. Our president was the co-chair of a commission set up by the International Labour Organization together with the Prime Minister of Sweden. I haven't read the report, but hopefully, has anybody here read it? On the future of jobs. But it raises an important question about what will jobs look like in 10 and 15 years' time? And how do we begin to prepare societies, including professions like your own, for that kind of future? Because I'm sure the kind of electrical engineering that you acquired in your training period and through your vast experience is going to be probably a little bit out of sync, to put it mildly, with the new demands that are beginning to emerge in your own profession as well. And the question is, how does that kind of adaptation actually occur, and how quickly can it occur as well? There's obviously the question of the just transition that I'm sure you are far more expert at than I am, but I think what that demands of us, particularly in our kind of context, is what happens to the 600 to 800 people that work at each power station. And a 55-year-old power station closes down, or when individual units within a power station like Indrina begins to close down. What's happening to thousands of people dependent on a coal mine in the proximity of the power station? And what kind of future can we say is designed for them as the coal mining industry comes under pressure, as it is coming under pressure at the moment? And I'm sure you know that whilst we have huge resources as far as coal is concerned, there is a massive challenge in getting investment into coal mines, and indeed into coal-powered stations as well. The World Bank and other international institutions have actually said clean energy or nothing else. The two financial institutions in South Africa have taken a similar stance as well, both in relation to the mining industry, but also in relation to coal-powered plants. Technology as far as renewables and alternate forms of energy is still dominated and in the hands of the Western or more advanced countries. And so in the past we used to talk about a digital divide. Today we're going to talk about a technology divide, because those who have access to the technology and have invested in R&D because of the resources that they have, both human and monetary, are not quite willing to share those resources on a free basis. We tried this a couple of years ago when the Green Climate Fund and so on was being set up through the climate talks, through the IMF and through the World Bank, but the Western or developed countries were quite clear. There's no free donations as far as this kind of technology is actually concerned. So amongst the challenges that you face is, as I said, to sum up at this point, one, the global trends. Second, engineering in the context of society and global trends more generally. The whole question of inclusivity and the new dynamics that are required of leaders, both in the political field, but more importantly, in the different disciplines in society as well. And if we don't look at those sorts of challenges carefully, then, as some of you said, time will pass us by, and we'll find that we are behind the curve as opposed to being, as leaders, ahead of the curve in terms of what is actually required. More specifically, in our own context, you referred to ESCOM particularly. I think our challenges there, and I'm sure this will come up in the Q&A, so I'll be brief, is to ensure that in the post-state capture period, we restore all of the basic systems and processes in ESCOM to some level of normality, because every crucial process in ESCOM was disrupted for one reason or another. Whether it is coal procurement, and we're still not out of the woods as far as that is concerned. There are still quality issues, if the quantity issues have been largely resolved. Secondly, the quality of maintenance and the kind of attention that various contractors have given, the kind of tasks that they have been assigned at the maintenance level. Thirdly, the depletion of skills in the right places and of the right skills. Good managers, as I said earlier on, and some of you pointed that out as well, who are honest and who were going to speak the truth, were either displaced or marginalized. And that's where the whole question comes, which is our current narrative. What happens to good, honest black professionals in institutions like ESCOM in terms of the more recent past that we've been through? And essentially, if you're honest, you were on the sidelines, or you were kicked out, or you were fearful, because fear was an important factor in making sure that the senior management was able to control that was actually required to be controlled. So the issue of skills and the deployment of skills is actually crucial as well. We've learned from elsewhere in the world, and I've been repeating this almost every day in the different fora that I speak in, that procurement is the crucial area of state capture. Whether it is procurement of coal, procurement of diesel, procurement of burning oil, procurement of parts, procurement of services, procurement of consultants, and I can go on with that list. So what we learned at an anti-corruption conference in Copenhagen is this wonderful slogan which says, procurement is the name, but corruption is the game. Right? Procurement is the name, corruption is the game. And so globally, the procurement area is the vulnerable area as far as institutions are concerned. And those are areas that need to be put right, let alone governance. In some instances, during the height of state capture, I mean, boards, inverted commas, were meeting at midnight, figuratively speaking, through teleconferences to sign off on a R1 billion contract, 600 million rands or 700 million rands of advance payments. But today, in some contexts, it says, some say it takes 9 months to 18 months to sign a similar kind of coal contract. So what's going on? It's something that that requires serious repair, if you like. But all of this is also, I think, crystallized in the financial challenges that ESCOM faces. I think you know the numbers, I'm not going to bore you with that. If you compare the numbers of 10 years ago to the current period, you have 32,000 staff producing the same amount of energy, 45,000 megawatts 10 years ago, and you have 48,000 people producing the same amount of energy today. So what are those extra people doing in terms of cost-effective delivery of electricity? If you take the price of coal, I think it's gone up 3 times, price of maintenance gone up 4 or 5 times. So everything has been multiplied by 3 to 5 times more in just a 10-year period. And that is what, including the kind of cost overruns at Medupi and Kusile, has caused the financial crisis that we find ourselves in. And in the radio interview I was doing just now, the question is, what do you do with 420 billion rands of debt? That's more debt than any company in South Africa has. And how do you actually manage that in the current environment? And it's that factor, together with the lack of transparency, lack of accountability, lack of clear sight of where costs are actually allocated and debt is allocated, that led the President and government to make the announcement that ESCOM should be split into generation, transmission, and distribution. And that as a first step, we need to get the transmission component established as a 100% owned entity within Eskom Holdings itself. There's of course a fight back element, as you know, amongst those who engaged in malfeasance, which says that all of this is designed to displace people from jobs. It's not true. Secondly, the other narrative is that this is all about privatization and the president selling stuff to his brother-in-law, amongst others. I'm sure your brother-in-law might get involved at some stage if the narrative goes that far. That's also not true. This is about restructuring an entity and positioning it so that it can serve South Africa for the next 4, 5, 6 decades as we go through the energy transition and the structural transition that we actually need to undertake as a country. So in that process, I think there's a broad idea of where we want to go. The details are now currently being worked upon, as is the process of consultation with trade unions. So there's 3 levels of consultation that we've established. One is at a ministerial level. We've met 2 of the 3 recognized unions in Eskom. The third one will meet early next week. The second is at a board level, so that the board also interacts with the trade unions and has an open channel of communication. And the third is at a management level, where it comes to labor relations and other related issues as well. We also have NEDLAC as a structure in South Africa, so NEDLAC has had a presentation on some of this, and we will engage in dialogue as far as some of these changes are concerned. But these changes are not ones that you can take 10 years over, because there's a sense of urgency that we need to apply to our own situation as well in order to get into the future. So the position at Eskom is one where we want to stabilize the institution as much as possible across all of the different fronts that I've mentioned and many that I haven't mentioned, firstly. Secondly, prepare the ground for its own structural changes. Thirdly, make sure that it becomes financially sustainable. And fourthly, while we're doing all of that, prepare for the energy transition and the kind of changes that Eskom will be required to adapt to. Some of which is demanded by the climate change commitments that we've made, some of which is demanded by the technology changes, both within the current environment, but the future environment of renewables as well. There are some imponderables on which I think people like yourselves need to come in and make a contribution. Where do you get extra base load from? What's the latest battery technology or storage technology? Because we must not romanticize renewables. They don't have the entire answer at this point in time, as I'm sure you know much better than I do. And there are some structural constraints as we sit together at this point in time. So those are the Eskom related issues. But as far as the profession is concerned, and I come back to yourselves, I think the issues of providing a clear vision to the profession in the social and political context in which we find ourselves is absolutely crucial, so that a leading body like your own can actually ensure that the profession is able itself to undergo the transition and cope with the kind of changes that any transition like this brings with it as well. So a clear vision which is aligned to the country's vision, I think, is absolutely crucial from your point of view. Secondly, to provide the kind of ethical leadership that was indicated earlier on, because we do need to repair our souls. Our souls have been badly destroyed. Greed and avarice and shortcuts that we've been taking as a country, the need to acquire, and this is not just a public institution challenge, it's a challenge that the private sector and the public sector need to confront equally, because there's 2 sides to this. You don't tango alone, except if you're looking in a mirror and practicing the tango. But I think you'll fail at that as well. So what is the national culture that we want to see in South Africa as the business culture in South Africa 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And what kind of ethical principles and values should it actually be based on.